here it is today. So yes, so we are back to where it all started, to Margherita's subjects. But today it's going to be a shorter presentation, but I really wanted to frame what we are going to see later on by focusing on one aspect that I touched upon yesterday. And I'm referring to this sort of novelty of the history of collecting. And because sometimes as contemporary historians, we read what we find from the past from the point of view of our own mindsets, but things were very different in the 16th century. And Margherita is a good example of how different things were then. So the idea of acquiring beautiful objects sometimes was also for a taste and an aesthetics, but most of the time it was related to some other aspects, and in particular to the idea that objects were knowledge-making tools. And I'm saying this because they did not know anything about the world. They did not know what was happening, why people got ill, why so many diseases, for instance, were spread around. And the only tools that they had was to observe nature and trying to give an explanation of world happenings through the objects. And so if you were a collector, you started to collect things that were beautiful, but also quite science related. And things that I want to talk about today are things related to stones that we will see later on, to natural material, and to a crazy combination sometimes of nature and artifice. So we enter back again one of the rooms of Margherita, where we can see once again one of her possible cabinets. But today I would like to concentrate on something that was inside. I hope you can all see the little white coral branch that is sitting on one of the shells. She also had a black coral branch, and she had a red coral branch. Coral was one of the most sought after materials during the Renaissance, and that's because it was one of the materials that was thought to help with the understanding of what was happening in the world. And I explain you why and how. So basically, the Renaissance was a time when maladies were at the daily the daily news, and people needed to protect themselves against them. They couldn't be vaccinated. They couldn't just stay at home, and so they surrounded themselves and their bodies with things that could be used as amulets, but with a sort of scientific explanation behind it, an explanation that nobody really wrote down perfectly, but it was believed that could work. And the powers of corals to protect a human body and a human household against earthquakes, against the evil, against blood loss. It was believed to protect women during pregnancy and during childbirth. Goes back to the ancient times, and it's quite interesting that one of the early Roman writers, Pliny the Elder, says that Indian diviners look upon coral as an amulet endowed with sacred properties and a sure preservative against all dangers. Hence, it is that they equally value it as an ornament, because it's so beautiful, as an object of devotion, because it was so powerful. And I wanted to start with this because most of the trades of coral happened in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean basin was full of coral of every shade, from pink to white to black and to red. And Margherita owned 632 boxes full of coral. And I had to count them all to make sure that I got the number right. Coral was sold in goldsmith shops, such as this one, which is representing one of the most famous paintings of Saint Eloi. And we can see beads of corals hanging from the shelf, as well as a little branch at the bottom, together with pouches with diamonds. I'm not sure whether you can see them down here. So I thought that today we are going to look at mosaics, which are stones. And nowadays we look at stones as, possibly as a, dead material that is just beautiful to look at and can be used in so many ways. But in the Renaissance, stones and things believed to be stones, such as coral, they knew it was fished, but they couldn't really understand that it was an animal matter. They considered coral like a stone, was imbued with many, many powers. What coral could do and could give to people was an ability to be transformed into something amazing. And in this sort of process of trying to understand the world by looking at the natural objects, goldsmiths and craftsmen were using their artifice to show people that the human mind and the human hand could win over nature. And so this is one of the examples of how they did it. And this, the little pendant inside it possibly is one of those objects that Margherita owned, because she owned a pendant with the scene, with the flight, with the rest during the flight in Egypt, which is exactly what we are seeing here. And the scene was created by chipping away coral from a substantial branch. It is hard to be certain that it was hers, because it was later on reset into this beautiful brooch type made of turquoise and enameled all over the sort of outer rim with beautiful colors resembling precious stones like emeralds and pink topaz. But little coral beads can be seen and spotted throughout the brooch. And I'm not sure whether you are familiar with something like this, but these are just a few of tens and tens of drawers at the British Museum, in the warehouses of the British Museum, that are covered entirely with little tiny pendants like these, carved in all shapes that you can think about, and all dating to the 16th century. This is because anyone really wanted to own a piece of this magical stone that would have protected them from all the maladies that were going on. And today I wanted to, I kind of went and took, my little coral amulet shaped as a little cross. This is something that within the European, but also Mediterranean populations is still very much an active belief. In the Renaissance, when they tried to understand how to protect themselves by using stones, they did that because they considered the skin an open sort of bridge, channel between what was outside the body and what it was inside the body. So anything that was considered powerful needed somehow to be touching the skin, because the skin's pores were seen as openings, and the powers of the stones, the powers of the materials would have then protected not only the physical body of a wearer, but also would have protected their soul. And I'm going to show you so many other stones that Margherita had and other people had during the Renaissance that were believed to protect them. And I'm saying this because when we will go into the Traversari workshop in Florence, we can then remind ourselves that what we will be looking at, if we had been Renaissance women walking into that workshop, we would have looked for specific stones that in our households would have not simply looked beautiful, but would also have been powerful. And if you have been to Sicily, some of you have, I remember you saying you've been to Sicily, these sort of corn-like sort of little amulets are everywhere. And still nowadays is a symbol of the sort of Mediterranean South. But Margherita did not stop at simply having a brooch and some amulets to cover her body with. She possessed things that I define as a sort of combination between nature and artifice. So things that did not have any use, but simply look beautiful and somehow make their presence being felt within a room. Imagine if we had something like this on our sideboard. It would have started a conversation about, oh, is it a natural piece of coral, or is it all man-made? What is it that has been created there? And again, I try to look in Margherita's inventory at objects that will help us also to look at the sort of marvelous way in which Andrea Salvatori, for instance, also plays with the combination between natural shapes and found objects and a sort of witful way to combine nature with artifice. This coral was fished in the sort of Tirreno Sea outside Florence, and taken to Milan, where it was set by the workshop of the Miseroni, a very famous goldsmith workshop in Milan. And I wanted to show you something even more extravagant that I think, again, would have possibly made Margherita smile when she looked at it, would have been a piece to take out from her cabinet, to make her friends smile too, together with her. And this is a combination of, and I think this is one of the images that can give us the idea of the playfulness of Renaissance makers. She had an ostrich egg mounted in silver gilt with coral branches scattered all over it. So I'm not sure this is exactly what she had, because there was no mention of this incredible, let me know if you can see it.
It's great.
Okay, because I don't know if you see the little titles of yourselves.
We do. Okay. We do.
So I need to put them there because I need to see your faces as I speak. But I'm not sure whether she had the ostrich itself. This ostrich is made in wood, and it's eating a horseshoe, because during the Renaissance, ostriches were believed to be able to digest anything, even iron, and gave the object a new layer of powerfulness. And I'm not sure whether, you know, it's sort of clear enough, but she did not have to do anything with it. Whereas yesterday we saw objects that were used even for their beauty, but they were put at the center of a table during a dinner party. This was left just to be admired, to be possibly touched, to be used as a trophy of her commission. This is Margherita's mind that goes into a workshop and asks for something beautiful to be created. And I think, again, it really reminded me of some of the objects that we will see later on, that apparently that don't have anything to say to us, but then when we start looking at them, they become treasures in themselves. Other things that Margherita owned in terms of stones were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rings. Rings were the piece of jewelry that was popular during the Renaissance. And that is because although pendants would have touched the skin, they often, especially for a woman, they would have remained hidden from the outside world. But the way in which the power of stones worked was a two-way sort of system. So one way was from the out. So the stones would have protected the wearer from the outer world, but also they would have protected whoever looked at the stone while the person was wearing it. And nothing would have said, would have been more on view than people's hands. Very few people ever wore gloves, and that's another sort of story. The history of gloves is incredible. Hands were often on view, and if you look even on museums' websites at many of the Renaissance paintings, portraits, men and women had every single finger covered in stones. And this is because, and I would like to tell you some of the powers of these stones, is, for instance, in this case, pink topaz was worn to calm evil passions such as jealousy and anger. And a woman's eye would have understood straight away the beauty, the value, and also the virtues of such a ring every time she saw it worn by a man or a woman. Another incredible stone that was believed to possess incredible powers was the emerald. Emeralds granted better eyesight to the wearer, would defeat the venom contained within poisonous food or drink. It's the Renaissance, you never know what you're served. And it would cast away any form of melancholy. So I thought, why not invest into one of the most beautiful emerald rings that I've ever seen, made by Disa Alsop, that was in conversation with Isabel during the first lockdown, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. Yeah,
I met Disa many times. And what I love about her rings is that, to me, they are reminiscent of the sort of Renaissance way of treating materials. So within a Kunstkammer, within objects of curiosities, within people's collections, they would have had objects that reminded them of their natural state, but simultaneously having been changed by craftful human hands. And I think these rings still give us today such an idea of where does nature end and the goldsmith's hand begin. Is a really clever way to keep the conversation going between materials. And when I realized that it protects from melancholy and sadness and whatever else, I thought that's a perfect excuse to ask for one. So not sure if you need an excuse, but this is a pretty good one. Margherita's house was not only full of stones with such power. She also had natural matter that we don't really know very well anymore in our contemporary age, but it was very popular during the Renaissance. So for a second, I would like for us to imagine this lovely young lady be our Margherita, of course, with her high starch collar and her black overcoat. The reason why I'm showing this to you is because she's wearing, once again, a combination of stones that would have changed the soul and pierced through the eyes of the onlooker and not just the wearer. But the other reason is because in Margherita's house, I found boxes containing what it was described as the horn of the great beast. And some museums, such as the Wellcome Collection, display things like this. Huge, this is about 2.5 meters long. I don't know in inches or feet, I'm afraid. Which of course we know being the horn of the narwhal. But in the Renaissance, people thought that this is what they were getting. Unicorns' horns were everywhere in any households. The story behind the unicorn horns of Margherita is incredible. I found correspondence with the Medici family, because when she was removed from the palazzo the night of the assassination of her first husband, few things she took. Some related to the effigy of Alessandro, as we saw yesterday, and then the boxes with the unicorn's horn, which I think tells the story of how much belief was contained within these objects. And a sort of lawsuit was started, and we have correspondence between the great Catherine de' Medici and Margherita of who between the two should have kept the powerful horn. Of course, they did not know that in fact it came from this other animal. A few other strange objects that she had, a mounted bezoar stone. So I had to look for what it was. And again, it's a natural material, is a sort of stomach stone that you find in goats and llamas. And it was apparently a sort of good use. It had good use in liquids and food. If you drank it or ate it, it would protect you from poison, epilepsy, and melancholy once again. It was often mounted in golden chains or vessels, and possibly had some liquid poured over and collected underneath, and then drunk from it. Another one was a benzoin gum pomander. She had lots of them. This is a little gum that you make as a ball, like Play-Doh, in your hands. And it was once more believed to protect from accidents related to diseases. What is interesting is that Margherita's pomander was not left in its natural state, but was, as you can see it here, covered in precious and semi-precious stones together with enamels. So nothing that she owned was left at a natural state, but everything was always in this kind of playful, constant playful relationship between nature and artifice. So with this sort of brief presentation, I wanted you to know and think about new ways in which women of the past looked at some of the stones, some of the objects in their homes, as sometimes beautiful, but a lot of the times powerful, healing little objects. So here it is for today, my presentation that shows you what this incredible woman wanted to surround herself with.
I think it's amazing. I mean, what it tells us, I think, is how we have forgotten or how we've moved away from putting objects in our life, in our homes, just to for their sheer beauty. And my worst enemy is Marie Kondo and her, let's have nothing in there. But what do you ladies think?
Oh, it was wonderful. Very interesting. I'm amazed what they were able to do. This piece, the brooch, in
Yeah.
particular, how they were able to carve that the top right turquoise and orange coral. It's I can't imagine a piece of coral and then having that come from it. You know, it's quite wonderful.
Is
Often,
it the same technique as the cameo, where you
yeah,
carve into the
yeah.
layer?
Yes, and it's also the same. There's the same sort of idea of following the natural veins of the material itself, and let's be inspired. But what nature gives in order to create the sort of representation. Often, coral was used for religious representations because, of course, the association with the protection of the blood reminded Christians of Christ. And so if you go to the British Museum, especially, the British Museum has one of the most amazing Renaissance collections of coral objects. They are, for the most part, with religious associations. But that's why I wanted to also, move onto something that was created to look like instead a tree, and to sort of have the pretense of have a natural object when in fact it was much more than that, and the details are also incredible.
Irene,
Sorry.
sorry, it's Marjorie. I'm really informed by your talk, and thank you so much. I always look at old art pictures and always thought it was just a show of wealth. So to find out it actually had a more natural, scientific, basis to it is fascinating to me. When did women therefore stop wearing all that dramatic jewelry because science had caught up?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you go to, as I said, if you go to Naples and south of Italy, there's the presence of uh, of uh, coral everywhere is is everywhere. So
Yeah.
So it never really stopped. What happened is that I found treatises of physicians that actually ran experiments at the end of the 17th century to see whether these powerful stones actually worked. And in fact, the conclusions were it's not, they don't do anything. But that the sort of interruption of wearing things and acquiring things for their powers, of course, went hand in hand with the sort of revolutions of philosophy and science. So when the French Illuminism came to Europe, when they started separating beliefs from reality, then it's when things really stopped really having more layered meanings, and objects were acquired just for their aesthetics or for their meanings. But I noticed how when I was at the goldsmiths company and I worked with so many jewelers, what I discovered by talking to them is that in fact for jewelers, those layered meanings are still all there.
Mm.
Every time they hold a piece of gold, or they hold an emerald as opposed to a pink topaz, or as opposed to a diamond, and for them there is so much more in all of those than just pieces of stones and materials to combine to create a beautiful object. So I think that maybe there is a new wave or a new necessity or a new need to kind of go back and think that some of the things that we wear maybe bring us luck or protect us somehow. Even a boa could do that. It doesn't have to be stones.
Thank you.
I- yeah.
I have a question. Sometimes in the medieval paintings, the Christ child has a coral little pendant. Isn't that a symbol of the crucifixion or something, or the
So I wanted to say, I didn't want to kind of add too many images, but when I mentioned the fact that children were often wearing a coral amulet around their necks, I wanted to show you Renaissance paintings with the Christ child with it. And the reason why it became associated with the crucifixion is simply because of its color. So it was believed that the reason why children, newborns were given coral, and mothers often were given pregnancy belts with coral studded in it, was because the redness of the material reminded people of blood, and therefore the association with various blood-related issue became very popular, and that then was sort of taken within the Christian tradition and associated it with Christ's blood. But it's the talismanic powers and properties of coral go back to the 3rd century before Christ. So, yeah. Yes, I hope it was, I think sometimes the past, unlocks things that we never thought about that might, bring us back new ways of looking also what we have in our own home, and fish you a little bit of bits of corals and string them around your necks.
Irene,
So,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I heard that that the red coral is also a sign of fertility, because when my daughter was trying to have a baby and get pregnant, she always wore a red. Someone gave her a red coral bracelet.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it was a sign of fertility.
Once again, it's because childbirth involves a lot of blood, and so the question is all of this. And then just one little last note: the reason why, together with the colors of all these stones that were supposed to be powerful, things that smelt nice, like the benzoin gum that I showed you before, that is just a little sort of gum that comes from a flower. The reason why things that smelt and looked beautiful were also thought to be powerful, it's because not only they thought that maladies came through the skin spore, but it's also thought that because the Renaissance cities stunk so badly, we don't think about this anymore, but the Renaissance was a time of terrible stench everywhere. Florence, Venice, Rome, you couldn't really stay too long outdoors. And so when people went out, they thought, gosh, the stench is gonna make me ill. And so I'm gonna cover myself with perfumed little pomanders. And if you were rich enough, then you would stud it with emeralds and rubies as well.